know. Let's say we can tell your. Okay, here we are. It's Friday night, and you're sitting at home wondering what in the world we're going to talk about. Well, you know tonight We're talking about marriage. Everybody's favorite subject, right? I just want you to know before we get started, there's 84 years of marriage experience on this platform. 84 years. And just for the record, Steph only gets 3 of them, man. So we got some years piled up here. And we're just going to talk about marriage. And I'm going to let these 2 guys kind of tell us what they've done. And I have some questions to ask them because they're really the professionals in that field. And I've got a world of experience, but they're the professionals. And but we invite your questions, your comments along the way, so please be a part. Let's start with a lady. Steph, tell us about yourself.
All right, well, my name is Steph. Stephanie Glenn. I've been at this church for 25 years now.
That's right.
Yeah, 25 years now, so pretty comfortable here. I went to University of Kentucky, studied marriage and family therapy, and I now work as a therapist for actually kids right now at Peace Hospital. You want to know, like, professional or just in general?
I don't care.
I've been married for 3 years. It's great. Yeah, that's about.
So your degree in marriage and family therapy, you're working with kids, but you're actually equipped to work in all kinds of fields.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, marriage, family, kids, everything. We do a lot of family therapy for the kids at work too.
We invited Steph for 2 reasons. Number 1, because she has some professional training. Number 2, because she's married to Daniel. And we're really going to dig into that. Ken and I, we have decided we're going to take advantage of this young girl and ask her some questions. And we only hope that Daniel's nowhere listening to what we're talking about. Okay, Dr. Ken Hollis, tell us about you, man.
Ken Hollis, I've been married 40 years. We have 2 adult children, 3 grandchildren. I pastored 36 years, but during much of that time I was a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I'm now the program director for marriage and family therapy at Campbellsville University. And we operate a counseling center. We train marriage and family therapists. I'm licensed, and I'm a nationally approved supervisor.
Wow, why don't you go ahead and pitch Campbellsville for us right now? They offer some neat opportunities. Go ahead and tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Campbellsville University, our marriage and family therapy program just recently moved out to the southwest end. So those who are familiar with Dixie Highway, which I assume is probably everybody watching, we're at the old Bacons, the old Dillards, whatever you call it. Our master's program, we have roughly 60 students in our program. We have a campus in California where we have another 20 students. We also operate a counseling center at our campus on Dixie. One of the things that we're doing during the coronavirus is we're offering free therapy to anyone who needs someone to talk with. And because we can't do face-to-face, we're all trained to do online therapy. We call it telehealth. So anyone that needs someone to counsel, anyone that needs someone to talk with, we have counselors that will see them for free. The other thing that we're doing, and we hope to have this running by next week, is offering 3 groups 7 days a week. So in the morning, we're planning on having about an hour group for children who want to come and talk to other kids about what's going on, a group in the afternoon for adolescents, and a group in the evening for adults. So if you or someone that you know would like someone to talk with, you can call Campbellsville, the counseling center. Our number is 694-4444, and someone will get back in touch with you.
Did you have a hard time remembering that number?
I certainly did. I was thinking I need to look at that real quick.
You see that?
Yeah, in fact, I think
He's a good counselor, but he can't remember phone numbers, so that's all right.
He sounded confident.
or names or anything else, really. I think I'll double check that real quick
I
now.
know, it sounded real
Yeah,
confident.
he absolutely knocked it out of the park. Before we get started,
I'm sorry, I did give the wrong number.
Oh, man, see what I told you?
Yeah, 694-1444.
Are you sure?
694-1444.
Do you need reading glasses?
Probably.
Dodie, would you please call and make sure this is okay?
I promise you I'm a much better therapist and a much better teacher than I am at remembering phone numbers.
If not,
694-1444.
If not, you are wasting your time.
I certainly am, and everyone else's.
Yeah, that's right. But I want to celebrate for just a minute before we get started. Campbellsville is really doing a unique job of offering a service to the community during this time. I love that. And to us as a group of pastors, attempting to help us just do a better job. And so we just celebrate that. So I don't know what we're going to talk about tonight, but I have a couple of things I just want to kind of pick you guys' brains about. Two things, and you want to go with the first one first or the second one first? We're going to let you choose, Steph.
Let's do the second one first.
I was afraid you were going to say that. I don't know which one's second. But anyway, do you think, we're in a time of crisis, everybody knows that. It seems to me that marriages respond to those times in one of a couple of different ways. They either get better or they get worse. Talk about that. Just, if we could for a minute, just talk about what seasons like this, the strains and the difficulties, if you can, that they put on marriage, and how we can be couples that get better through that rather than get worse through that, you know? So.
It doesn't matter if you want me to.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Ladies first.
I think one important thing for marriages and just in general is taking time away from media. You know, if you're sitting there, and any night, even if there's not a pandemic going on, just constantly scrolling, that takes time away that you can be, hey, I'm worried about this, let's talk about this, instead of I'm going to read all of this stuff on the news, it's going to say negative things. But as far as like spending a lot of time together, I think it's so important that you see if your marriage has that friendship quality. That's so important in a marriage, and that you know that if I'm communicating with you and a little bit of stress comes out, you're not assuming the worst and that I am trying to attack you or anything like that, and that I can realize, hey, I didn't mean to speak to you that way. This is what's going on instead. But just that friendship quality of like, hey, let's make this fun together. We can't maybe do our normal routines, but let's go do this together and we'll find just as much fun doing this.
See, she's already addressed something to me, Ken, that I didn't want her to address.
Oh,
And
no?
that is, I'm
I'm
supposed to
sorry.
have a friendship quality that when you speak to me that way, I know you're not attacking me.
Yeah.
Well, man, I can still feel attacked, just, you know.
Absolutely. You said it.
And I have to work at that. That's a real deal. Now,
And not to ignore that, but to also say like, hey, I'm going to try to assume positive intent here and not negative intent from them, which is hard to do though.
Let me ask you can ask her anything you want to, but Ken and I are both older than you, obviously, and we have different ways that we're distracted. And honestly, I'm not as dependent upon, that's a lie, I guess. I'm not as connected to my cell phone as your generation. But even over dinner time and the evening when you have to gather, you say one of the things, you have to battle media distractions. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's pretty consistent. It's pretty, especially if you've got like a group message with friends and you just, it's buzz, 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 just over and over again messages coming in, which is so great that you have those friends, but it really can take away, even if you're not responding, it distracts you and you see it. So to be mindful of like, hey, we're going to put our phones in the other room and we're just going to sit out here and talk to each other just away from phones.
Okay, Ken, jump on that any way you want to. Tell me anything you see in that.
The research is actually pretty discouraging. I mean, what the research says is that when you have a time of crisis where people are isolated, that spousal abuse increases, child abuse increases, anxiety, depression, suicide increases.
Oh, man.
It's one of the reasons why our counseling center, and frankly lots of counseling centers, are offering free services and telehealth and group, because what we'd like to think is that when things get hard, families pull together, but what more likely happens is that if there's faults in the relationship and things get hard, it exacerbates the faults. And so I think what has to happen is couples have to be really intentional about taking care of themselves individually and taking care of each other. And Stephanie's exactly right. There's tons of research that says spending too much time on social media is the worst thing you can do.
Really?
Too much social media, too much television, particularly if you're watching news shows, and we have a 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah, we do right now.
Increases anxiety, it increases depression. It is one of the worst things you can do. And so couples have to be really intentional to spend time together. And some couples find this a time when they actually can grow closer if they're intentional, and they walk together, they spend time talking together, they have time to play games together, they have, but you really have to be intentional about it.
Wow. Is this not both of you guys would agree with that, but Ken, is this not as difficult a season as the family's been through in a long time? I mean, this season, this pandemic season, with job loss and kind of shut in and shut down and all the normal things, no NCAA tournaments, you can't go out and sit and eat in the restaurant, and so mama's got to cook. That's a huge amount of pressure.
It's huge, and in my experience, I don't know what you would compare to it. Yeah. As a nation, you're exactly right. We're isolated. Isolation is always the enemy of mental health.
Wait a minute, you probably need to repeat that.
About isolation. Isolation is the enemy of everything. Isolation is the enemy of mental health. It's the enemy of spiritual health. You've said, I've heard you say a million times, we're built for relationships.
Yeah.
And when you put us in a setting where we can't relate, particularly the way that we're used to, it creates huge amounts of stress for couples and huge amounts of stress for individuals. And yeah, I think this is as stressful a time as a nation. As you said, not just with the isolation, but unemployment and all the uncertainty and the fear of a pandemic. And this is a frightening time for a lot of people. And
we had a real comfortable routine, that we entertained ourselves a certain way, we ate a certain way, and all of that kind of out the window. I mean, just totally out the window. And so it's a real threatening time. Now, what do you do, Steph, if you feel like you and Daniel are in one of those moments where you're not isolated, but you're not connecting like you need? I mean, what do you do?
It's hard to say sometimes because we don't always handle it perfectly. You can
well,
say
we don't
things
either.
that are not.
Ken does. He's got the degree. He does, but we don't.
He handles it perfect every time.
Yeah.
But if we're not feeling connected, the big word intentional is that it was that you used, and I love that word, and that was my word for the year. Is just being very intentional. So just the ways that we try to communicate to each other, even down to like love languages. I know if Daniel's is, words of affirmation, certain things that I'm going to say to him that are very specific to something that he is doing to make him feel like, hey, she noticed that. That was a really big deal. He's very, very good about that. I'm not just trying to pump him up, but he is very good at finding ways that'll help me feel like, oh, he's noticing this today. Or he's being very intentional about like, hey, I know you were stressed about this. How did this go for you? Or tell me about, if I'm doing something different at work, which I've been having to do. It's pretty just kind of up in the air right now what we're doing. He'll be very intentional to say like, hey, how did that group go today? I know you're a little bit nervous about it. Wow. And so just little things like that help us.
He's pretty attentive.
He's very attentive. Attentive is huge and it's very important, and he's very, very good at that.
Are you, wait a minute, let me interrupt. Are you as attentive to him as he is to you?
I try to be.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing.
It's not easy, like I said, but it's something that he has taught me a lot about. But we'll do stuff like go for walks together. Last night we did a game where we just found like random questions online. It was like 100 questions to ask, and we just went through and just asked random questions that we probably wouldn't have thought of on our own, just to spend that time together and more intentional conversations, and not just what do you want for dinner, but a little bit deeper.
Do you remember one of those questions?
Can I remember one of those questions?
Yeah, like what was one of those questions?
Oh gosh.
That you guys felt like that was a pretty good question.
Pretty good question. Let me think of one that was really good. Trying to think of a good one.
But that's just something you guys Googled, basically?
Yeah, it was just like 100 questions to ask your spouse. I'm trying to think of a good one that's not super generic, but I'm trying to think of
There are probably a lot of them more.
I mean, one of them is just like, what's the very first thing you would do if you got $1 million? And I was like, it's a pretty good one, because I mean, there's things I know I want to do eventually, but I don't know the very first thing I would do with that. But just fun questions like that. Mm-hmm.
First thing I do, smile.
Right.
Now, I want to jump on your comment, and Ken, let you address. I don't want to be too easy on Steph. That seems easy, but you had 2 or 3 kids in the situation. You got a couple of toddlers. You got a homeschooler now, because, and boy, I'm telling you, these 2 kids need attention, and you've got to guide the schoolwork because they're out of school right now. And man, that ability to be intentional and attentive to one another can go out the window pretty fast. Any thoughts about, I mean, can you help us at all?
No, you're exactly right. I want to say one thing real quick about what Steph was talking about. The questions that she was referring to, the kind of marriage counseling that I do is based off of John Gottman's research. And you can actually go on the web, and Gottman has a series of cards, which is just hundreds and hundreds of questions that you can ask your spouse just like that to get conversations go. I have an iPhone, they're free download on Apple, but there's lots of resources like that that's just really easy to get off the web.
Would you know off the top of your head, you probably won't be dependable, how could
Probably
you find
wouldn't.
how could you find Gottman's cards on the internet?
I would just type Gottman or Gottman resources in the search engine.
Is that G-O-T-M-A-n?
Gottman.
Okay, see you two, both professionals said TT at the same time. So
right.
I feel properly rebuked right in this moment. Thank you.
Can't
for
believe
what
you said one T.
Well,
embarrassing.
I have the book, but I can't remember how to spell the author's last name. But that proved to be a neat tool just for you guys to just talk to one another.
Absolutely.
Man. But it does get complicated, you know. And then you take work schedules and little
Really does.
financial pressure and the kids and I know some families, silly little things like as a couple, they really don't have a routine with their kids. So the kids are up till 10 o'clock, and we're talking little guys. And by the time the husband and wife go to get 5 minutes of quiet time, they're completely exhausted. And they do that day after day after day after day. And there's no time to be attentive to one another. And that's huge in this season. Wow. So is there any other thing that you would say right now in this season where the pressure's on that is a great resource to just helping a marriage go stronger and not go the other direction? Anything else come to your mind?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are lots of, again, it goes back to being intentional. If couples need counseling, there's still telehealth available. If couples aren't looking for counseling, there's still ways just to be really intentional that we're going to spend time exercising together, or we're going to take a walk together, or we're going to start having dinner together. I mean, one of the things that I encourage my couples to do, because right now it's so easy to be focused on just overwhelmed by negativity, to have conversations with each other about, name 5 things you're thankful for, or name 3 blessings, or talking about, what's the first thing that we want to do whenever this is over and what's the first restaurant that we want to go eat at, what's the first movie we want to go see, and get people having more of a forward focus, because this is going to end.
Yeah.
This isn't going to last forever, even though when you're in it, it feels like it is. And so it's really important that couples, again, being intentional, it's really important for individuals and couples to be intentional about focusing on positives. I had a session recently, and it was kind of neat because this couple started talking about, as much as they hate this, some of the good things that have come out of it. And they're spending more time talking and more time playing with their kids, and they were actually able to see that, we'll be glad when this is over, but there are some things that we've been reminded of that's really important.
Man.
But again, it goes back to being intentional, that you have to look for the good, because one of the worst parts of human nature is that most of us seem to be, it's easier for us to see negatives than see positives.
Now, Steph, I want you to respond in a minute to that second half of finding opportunities in this time. So I want you to respond to that. But what happens, Ken, if you're in a relationship and you want to be intentional, but man, somehow being the initiator, I don't know, maybe you've kind of gone off the page with one another, or you're having a bit of you're just disconnected a little bit, and it seems a little odd to say, honey, could we just sit down and talk tonight? And she's like, you're the last guy in the world I want to talk to. What are we going to talk about? Or how do you start that? I mean, I guess you just got to start.
Yeah, you do just have to start, and you start slow. You start with something that both of you feel good about. Maybe it's not talking together. Maybe it's something as simple as, can we go for a walk this evening? But to begin that process of rebuilding connections, and I tell clients when I work with them that, everything that we're talking about doing is going to feel awkward because you haven't been doing it for a while, and it's okay for it to feel awkward. It's okay for you to not do it perfectly. We're just starting, we're just trying. And so you're just looking for really small steps, and generally people can make those if they'll try.
Well, I kind of know how difficult that can be. I feel like, and don't forget, we're going to talk in a minute, but as a pastor, I've said 100 times, if we would just stop in the middle of this little misunderstanding we're having and just take one moment and pray, we could move beyond this. Mm-hmm. I can tell you, in 40 years of marriage, I haven't done that a half a dozen times.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just seems hard to me. Maybe all you guys do it more easily than I do. It seems hard to make that transition, man. Here I am, the pastor, saying, we just need to stop and treat one another with love and respect and have a short prayer and we can move on. Yeah. I'm as mad as she is and we can't do anything. We just get stuck there, It
is hard. It is hard. Again, that's one of the things I talk about with clients. All the things we're talking about, as simple as they sound, whenever you're just sitting here talking and you're not upset with each other, when you have to do it, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And that's why you just try. You don't be upset that you don't do it perfectly.
Just do it.
Don't be discouraged that you only did it one day out of 7. Just start. Just try. Mm-hmm. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you start to get with it.
I like that. That's good. That's good. Okay, Steph, his client said he's actually found, this is actually question number 1 that we're treating as question number 2 now. He has a client that actually found that this time, though none of us wish it included sickness and death for so many, absolutely, has brought some new and different things to us as families and as couples. And you guys talk about the positive things that you feel like are kind of coming out of this shutdown or whatever it is.
Yeah, I've personally, even just work conversations have changed. People have kind of wanted to say, like, okay, well, why is this happening? There's something bigger than this. Am I being punished for something? Is something bad have I done that I can't get, my life cannot stay the same as it was? And opening up conversations just where God is in all of this. Yeah. And so not even, just marriage conversations, but just relational conversations with people at work. And having a second at work to be like, hey, we have like 10 minutes where we can talk right now, and normally we don't have that 10 minutes where we can talk. It's just, on to the next thing. So just to sit there and realize, like, hey, they're actually wanting to talk deeper than this, and I'm not going to rush this conversation. I'm going to sit here and say, like, yeah, this is how I've seen God in this. Just the fact that you're talking to me about this today, like that alone is God moving in this. And the fact that, hey, we're all keeping our jobs right now. The people at my work, we're able to come in each day, and while things look different, this is something that we get to do every single day and still be around each other. And to me, that's a huge positive. Seeing connections with people that maybe I haven't been connecting with as much recently, but like I'm just, hey, I'm going to FaceTime someone real quick just to let them know that I care about them. And I'm not saying that this is what sometimes that takes, but sometimes something like this will make you realize how important relationships are. And it's like, I'm really not going to make an excuse next time someone asks me to see them for 10 minutes. I'm going to go hang out with someone, and just awareness of how important relationships are and how much we can miss out on those. But we say a lot of bad things about technology, but it has so many positives if you use it appropriately and you use it for connection and not to disconnect from reality. If you're picking it up as soon as you're anxious about something to avoid what you're thinking about, that's when it...
Do you guys hear all that professionalism coming through there? Man, that's amazing. Any kid. Somebody taught her. Yeah.
I try.
That's good. No, that's good. That's good.
But yeah, just if you notice yourself doing in an anxious moment, trying to replace that with another behavior, that's not avoidance. Like, whew, I need to pray about this real quick, or I need to talk to someone about this real fast, rather than just blinding yourself from what's actually really going on.
I love that.
But there's a lot of positive, like you were saying, and it's so important if you can identify just something one day that happened, like, hey, this happened today and this was really great. We work with some very difficult families at work, and even some of the parents talk to me on the phone, and, well, Miss Stephanie, I'm just thankful that my kids are healthy right now. And it's like they've got not many resources at all right now, but even when they can find something that's positive, really makes you realize that there's a lot.
You
That's
know,
good.
I had a little personal encounter with that for me, and I shared it a little bit, and that is, I tend to get up in the morning and want to recall those positive things.
Absolutely.
But the air goes out of my balloon before the day's over. And I'm trying to learn to celebrate those positives when they happen, you know, not wait and say, now let me go home tonight and try to feel okay about this day. So what good things happen? I'd rather really kind of celebrate that along the way, and I'm getting better. I'm not there yet. I'm getting better.
It's hard to.
I want to ask you, Ken, in terms of making that reconnection, is there any kind, I don't know why this question came to my mind, is there any kind of research that says one gender does that better than the other? Somebody taught me years ago, I don't remember who it was, you guys may know, that they said basically your wife has the guide to marriage. It's wired in her, and if you'll just listen to her, she will tell you, you know, what you need to do. Now, I've tried to use that on Anita a few times, and it normally doesn't get me anywhere. You know, she would say, you know, we're both in this thing. But is there one gender that initiates and is more intentional, or is it just as unique as personalities?
There is research. Gottman does lots of research on differences between sex. What you said ultimately is true. It really varies from couple to couple.
Yeah.
The idea that women are more wired for relationships is actually true.
Yeah. Okay.
They've done the brain researchers have done lots of research on the difference between male brain and female brain. And female brain seems to be built more for relationships. They're more communicative. They have much wider emotional range as a whole, painting with really broad strokes. Having said that, Gottman's research says that actually husbands have more power in wives than women. I mean, husbands have more power in marriages than their wives, which is totally counterintuitive because, you know, guys love to complain about how, you know, our wives are in charge and we work for them and all that nonsense. But what Gottman's research says is that if a marriage is salvageable, that if the husband makes a small positive change, the wife reciprocates with an equal or larger change. And that it doesn't work the other way around. And the reason it doesn't work the other way around is that our brain seems to be built for single tasking. And oftentimes wives will make a small positive change and we just miss it. We don't even notice it. And so from a spiritual point of view, I think that's consistent with scriptures. You know, we talk about husbands being the head of the house.
Sure.
And for a lot of people, what they interpret that is that, you know, I'm in charge and I get to tell my wife what to do, and that's all nonsense and bad theology.
Yeah.
I think what it means is that the husband, if you want to consider yourself a leader, from a biblical point of view, a leader is the first servant. And that if you want to consider yourself a leader in your home, it means that you accept responsibility for the quality of your marriage.
I like that.
And so, yeah, husbands, as much as it sometimes seems like we're not naturally built for it, it's really important for us to find ways to initiate with our wives, you know, to demonstrate love and respect, to try to communicate. Gottman's research also looks at what he calls bids for attention. Which is something as simple as when your spouse speaks to you that you respond. And it doesn't
So
have to be
she's bidding for your attention.
yeah,
in that
and that's what a
process.
bid for attention is, that one person says something to another and you simply respond,
Yeah, man.
which is so small.
Have you seen people ignore those? Oh my goodness! So
Constantly.
you're sitting there saying it's so obvious that she's wanting to talk to you right now, and you won't get off your phone or whatever. It's like, oh my
That
goodness.
rejection is so destructive, you know, just that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if that begins to happen, it's not too long till you're not bidding anymore. It's kind of like,
That's exactly what
you know,
happens.
I'm done. I'm not going to try to get your attention. You obviously are not going to respond.
And so for husbands to begin to find ways to initiate that connection with their wife, again, even as something as small as saying, you know, do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to go get ice cream? Do you want to play a game? Do you want just something? It's amazing how powerful that is. But again, the research says husbands have more influence because if we try, our wives generally notice.
Wow.
And oftentimes wives are trying, and we just, you know, I sometimes tell the wives that I work with, if some night you just feel like messing with your husband, you want to make him cry.
Make him cry?
Yeah, make him cry.
Okay,
When he walks in the room, ask him if he notices anything different, and watch him dissolve into a puddle. Because most guys will start looking around and going, you know, is that a new dress? Did you change your hair? Did we paint the kitchen? Is it your birthday? Is it my birthday? Is it our kid's birthday? Do we have kids? Because guys just, you know, we don't pay as much attention to the nuances, and so it's huge when a guy does something small.
Because she's going to notice it.
She will notice. Wow. If the marriage is salvageable, is
Right.
I understand.
therapeutically is
Yeah, I
the
understand.
key.
Yeah.
If there's enough interest in the relationship to keep that thing going. Wow, that's amazing that she can be doing all kinds of things and we miss it. But if you and I, make some kind of initiating, attentive, careful move toward, then they pick up on it.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Man.
I think there's something even small, like if we're brushing our teeth at night, if he'll go in first, he'll leave the toothpaste out on my side. So small. But to me, I'm like, he thought of me in that moment just to leave it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something very small, but I've noticed that he's done that. And it's something he's done for a while. But he's like, oh, yeah, you noticed that? And I was like, of course I did. The first time you did it, I noticed. But again, it's not really a huge inconvenience for me to go in the drawer and get it. But it's just a little, like you said, just a little bit of, just a little connection. I really thought of you in that moment. Yeah.
So we don't necessarily have to do great, big, huge things to make some kind of significant impact on our marriage.
Because that gets overwhelming to think about, too.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know, what
man.
am I
You got to
gonna
buy
do
candy
that-
every day or get a
especially
card
if
once a
you-
week or
yeah,
whatever.
especially if you're not at a
Gets to
place
be
that's
too much.
super, feeling like you're connected to
Yeah,
think,
that's right.
I'm going to go do this, it's going to feel silly, this big gesture, and how are they going to receive that? But like you said, it doesn't take a big gesture like that.
It really is the small stuff. I mean, marriage
love
isn't
that.
about, it's not big things that keep marriages together. It's not big things that break marriages up. Generally, it's an accumulation of small positives, or it's an accumulation of small negatives.
That's amazing.
And it's the small stuff that matters.
You know, I found a goofy little thing. I even preached a sermon about it one time. That taking out the garbage is a big deal in our home. When I notice the can's full, we have a cupboard area and the garbage is can. When I notice the can's full, I'll take it out. And most of the time she never says a word about it. But every time I'm like, I want to take the garbage out. And it has been a silly little discipline that I think communicates, you know, I'm just trying to take care of you in some way in that process. And I wish I did that good in every area, and I don't. But it's encouraging to think, in a season when there's a lot of pressure, guys in particular, if you just make some kind of step forward, then it can be very, very helpful.
Absolutely.
Wow. Now, we're not leaving much room for questions, Trev. I don't know if everybody's watching and nobody has questions of these professionals, but if you're watching and have a question, you can ask these guys. If not, I'm just going to wear them out. So that'll be fine.
Either way,
But,
either way.
it's certainly a season. Is there any...
There was one question. Did you see that?
Yeah, the one question that is on there here is, I have a friend that is looking at divorce. She is in an abusive relationship and has been. She has found a safe place with her ex-husband and is looking at getting back in that relationship. So the question is, biblically, can she leave? Biblically, can she get back to her first husband? Should she stay and work it out?
Ken, you want to address that? You want me to?
Can you read that one more time?
Yeah. So I have a
Or
friend
summarize it. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, either
looking
one.
at a relationship. She's got a friend is an abusive relationship. She's found a safe place with the ex-husband. So the question really is, biblically, can she leave and get back with the first husband, or should she stay and work it out with the current abusive relationship husband?
That's a really difficult question to answer, not knowing a whole lot of details, like what's the relationship like between she and the first husband. The relational part, I'll let you answer the spiritual part.
I will.
The relational part is staying in an abusive relationship is always dangerous. And it can be hard to leave, and that's why Center for Women and Children is a really good resource, because they can help people develop safety plans, help them. But the problem with abuse is that abuse is cyclical and it increases. And abusers are masterful in their ability to do something and then apologize and offer some grand gestures and make you think that they're never going to do it again. But the reality of abuse is that unless something interrupts it, it tends to simply increase in frequency and increase in severity. And this is my own personal theology, so people can agree with it or disagree with it. I've known some people that take that passage about that the only reason for divorce is infidelity in a really, really literal sense, which means if my spouse isn't sleeping with someone else, then I don't have grounds for divorce. I don't understand it that way, because in my mind, abuse is infidelity. If you've never slept with anyone else, that's not the question. Abuse is infidelity. If we really are called to love our wives the way Christ loves the church, abuse is unfaithfulness. And I've actually known people, I've had clients that were in churches that were really rigid, that would tell them, if your spouse hasn't slept with someone else,
You're stuck, man.
you have no grounds to leave, even if they were being physically abused. And I think that is so wrong spiritually. And as a therapist, I know it's so wrong emotionally, that if you're in an abusive relationship, you have to find a way to get safe. Now, with this particular instance, I don't know anything about the first husband. I don't know. So I wouldn't know how to answer that. I would encourage the lady that they're referring to seek good therapy. Mm-hmm. But I have a different understanding of what infidelity is. So
yeah, I want to just kind of jump on what Ken said a little bit. You know, there's a place in the Old Testament, I think it's in the book of Micah, you may be able to tell me, where it's very clear that God hates divorce. You know, and I believe God does hate divorce. Mm-hmm. You know, His plan was, in fact, we had a wedding rehearsal in here tonight with a wedding that could only be immediate family and no other because of this season. But God's plan is that the two come together and become one flesh. I mean, one flesh. Your arm is my arm. We are, and to rip that apart in any situation, I think, is not what God had in mind. But to get as literal and as difficult as sometimes the church has been with that issue, I personally look at divorce like a sin, which, and I know if you are in a situation that you're being abused, it's not sinful to get out of that. But I see divorce as something that can be forgiven, and that you can be forgiven as somebody who made the wrong decisions or end up in the wrong relationship, can be restored and can have the possibilities of a new and healthy and wonderful relationship moving forward. Now, there are lots of places that hang some ultimate stigma on that, as if you are doomed and bound forever to be, you know, destroyed and ugly, and I don't give it that. But I'm not a therapist, but I agree with these guys that the answers are so unique to every situation, but it's hard to throw out a generic thing and say, this fits. You know, the ex-husband may be a safe place. The ex-husband may not be a safe place. Mm-hmm. There's no way to know all of that. Mm-hmm. But there's always hope. I think Ken gives great advice, and Steph, you may want to speak to that. Yeah, abusive relationships just get worse unless there's some interruption in the process. They just get worse. But there's always hope for us beyond those relationships. And I just believe that. I've seen too many times that people have come out of brokenness and ended up in a relationship that was healthy and good and lasted for a lifetime, you know, as possible. Any words from you, Steph?
It's
about
hard
all that?
to say anything that would,
Hadn't
you know,
already been said.
but I would just say, you know, we don't know the situation of the ex-husband, you know, we don't know, but like you said, primarily right now you're looking for safety. And it can be so easy to see something as so much better than what you're currently in right now. So that may be safer right now with ex-husband, but I don't know what ex-husband, we know why that did not work either. So I would just focus primarily on safety as of right now before looking into like, oh, I'm going to start this relationship back up, because a lot's going to look better than what you're currently in at this time right now.
Good, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the only question right now. I have a question for Harry and for Ken, and Steph, you could add into that too. But for me, I think about my generation who has kids, they have families, and this time can be stressful, but then you throw in kids on top of that, right? Like it's a tough time sometimes, you know. When Steph gives the example of her husband puts out the toothpaste for her, I'm thinking, man, I just do good just to get the kids' teeth brushed and put in bed, you know.
I understand.
And so do you guys have any advice for the families who are dealing with that day in, day out, maybe even for the moms who the days seem to get longer and longer? Like give some advice, some encouragement, because you especially, you've been, Harry, a father who knows exactly where people have been in that scenario. Well,
Man, I'm in no position compared to these guys, I don't think, to address that issue. But I would say, yeah, we kind of danced around that earlier. Life gets awfully complicated when you got a house full of kids. Particularly, the issues change. Those are the easiest times in some senses of the word, and they're the hardest times in a different sense of the word, you know. And it gets hard. And the only thing that comes to my mind, really, a couple of things come to my mind. I think, I would speak as a husband primarily because that's the role I know. Man, you got to love their mother. I mean, you really have to be in love with her mother, and you have to treat her like you love her, and they see that and recognize that, and you have to honor her and not treat her maybe like my generation more than your Steph, that said, hey, mothering's your job. I go to work and I bring home the check, and I'm tired when I get home, and you manage the kids, and it's your generation does better than ours does because you guys see that you share that role. Now, my dad, he didn't share in that role at all, and I probably have not shared in it as much as your generation will. But part of the help is just recognizing we're both here, and this is both our jobs, and not dump too much on her. Now, that's a husband speaking. I don't know, but literally share that responsibility, share that role. And the other thing, and then I'll shut up, I think personally, and maybe not everybody can do it, there's value in a schedule. You know, the kids, until they get in a certain age, man, I think it's good to have a bedtime. You know, I think it's good to have a bedtime, whatever time it is. And Anita and I used to love the kids in bed by 8 or 8:30, and we'd have an hour and a half, 2 hours to do whatever we wanted to do, you know. And man, had it not been for that little cushion, there have been a few times that we'd have lost it, man. I think relationally, I know we would have lost it. So I think you have to carve out times for one another, even when it's as busy as what you guys are going through. I mean, what lots of families go through right now. And now you guys, Steph, Ken, you've got a lot more professional response to that than I have, so I don't know.
I agree with what you said. I was going to say earlier, this is a whole lot more difficult on my daughters and their families than it is on me and Dodie. I mean, we've been married 40 years, and we understand each other really well, and we know how to give each other space and how to come back together. And it's difficult, probably more difficult for Dodie than for me because she's more extroverted. But for my kids, our oldest daughter has a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. She's the school psych, so she's still working from home. Our youngest daughter is a teacher, and so she's having to do online learning now and has a 4-year-old. And 4-year-olds especially do not care what your schedule is.
No, man.
All they
No.
care about is, and so it's really hard for them. I think there's a couple things that's important. One is I think parents have to give themselves a little bit of grace.
Oh, yeah. me too.
Because one of the things
Me
that I've
too.
seen parents do is just beat themselves up because they're not doing it perfectly.
Ken, I think, just for a second,
Yeah.
especially Christian parents,
Oh,
man,
yeah.
we get so sensitive to that we can wear ourselves out. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. That there's sometimes we're so idealistic,
Yeah,
so
man, yeah.
so hard on ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
That I got upset with my kid, or I didn't do this, or I didn't do that, and parents have to give themselves a break. That right now, to a large degree, we really are in survival mode, and survival mode is exactly that. You're not going to do it perfect. You're never going to do it perfect, but having everybody at home at the same time is stressful for everybody. And so you got to give yourself a bit of a break. I think the second thing that you have to do is, particularly for the adults, they have to focus on some level of self-care. They've got to give themselves permission to have some time to themselves. They got to give themselves permission to exercise. They got to give themselves permission to get some rest as much as they possibly can. And again, no one's going to get it adequately, but they have to realize they still need some time to themselves. What you said about schedule and routine is exactly right. That when kids are going to school, they have a schedule, they have a routine, they have this class starts here and this class starts this time and lunch is here, and so if anything, it's really useful for parents to even create more routine and more schedule for their kids. That when we're home, my oldest daughter and her husband, I've noticed that they have the 2 boys. And I think they're doing this really well, that, during the day, these are your chores and these are your responsibilities and these are things that you have to get done. And here's the time when we're having homeschooling. And they're still building in lots of fun time. And, Tracy told me today that they spent a couple hours out in the front yard because they are really taking this social distancing seriously. And they spent a couple hours in their front yard just playing football today. And tomorrow they're going for a hike, and so they're doing lots of things because kids have lots of energy.
Sure they do.
And you can't say, sit down and read for the next 6 to 8 weeks. But they've come up with a really good schedule and a really good routine. Because one of the things that happens is that when, as adults, we lose our routine, we lose it at home too.
Yeah.
And suddenly kids are staying up much past their bedtime, and they're getting up much later than normal. And instead of eating what they would normally eat, they're eating more junk. And yeah, one of the best things that families do right now is to try to create routine, try to create schedule, try to carve out, like you said, whatever time you can. For us as a couple. Yeah. Single parents, it's much harder for.
Oh, yeah.
Then,
I
again,
can only imagine.
I mentioned both my daughters, they have husbands who are really supportive. I've got students who are going to school in my program, and they're single mothers or single fathers, and they're trying to work from home and take care of kids and work through a master's program, and which goes back to the idea at some point you got to give yourself a break.
Do they have any hair at all, or have they pulled it all out?
I don't know what you're referring to. I
can see
really
why
don't
you wouldn't-
appreciate the bald joke.
I didn't mean, that wasn't a bald joke, man. I didn't even think about that.
No, of course you didn't.
He's a little self-focused, you notice
I'm a
that?
little, yeah. I don't understand all the references to being bald.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, that's good.
I got one question for Steph, and this might be just a tough one, but
Can't wait.
I'm thinking in terms of like your career path and where you spend your daily task of loving and encouraging kids and helping them through a lot of tough situations.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you find yourself in terms of what is one thing that you can see kids are lacking in those situations? Does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
No, it does, yeah. I would say an overarching theme that these kids are lacking is basic just security. with that is a lot of things go into security,
Sure.
consistency, love, safety, hugs, all that kind of stuff. But just security of like, hey, you know, some kids, I'm getting discharged from the hospital. I'm like, where are you going? They're like, I don't know. And I'm like, just a constant fear of not knowing if their needs are going to be met. You know, I don't know when I go home tonight if my needs are going to be met, whether that's physical needs, emotional needs, spiritual needs, whatever that may be. Just if there's any inconsistency in that. So it's such a big thing that you talk about routine and structures and boundaries. Kids desire boundaries. They need to see that this is the line and anything past that's not safe. But when there's no boundaries, nothing feels safe, nothing feels secure. So, you know, if our program, it's every day it looks the same. They love that. They thrive in that because they know what to expect, and they know that the adults there are not going to scream at them or hit them when they need to communicate to them. But I would just say just basic lack of security. And whether that's intentionality from the parents or families not providing security, or just them not knowing themselves. They may not themselves feel secure. You know, they're trying to make basic needs met and just trying to survive. They literally just feel like they're trying to survive. And I'm trying to get dinner on the table tonight. I don't have time to think about anything else. You know, if the parents are depressed, if the parents are anxious, how are they supposed to pour into a child who has so many needs every single day as well? Children are resilient, but they still need all of that stuff.
Yeah, I remember a number of years ago, I was at some Promise Keepers function, and a guy was speaking about the need for significance and the need for security. Mm-hmm. And I realized I grew up with the need for significance being met, but the need for security was not always met.
Absolutely.
And boy, that kind of stuff, it takes a lifetime to get over that, and sometimes you don't ever get completely over it, you know? And
Absolutely.
so it's a huge, huge deal.
Yeah.
And
So I have a follow-up question about kind of that routine and scheduling that I think we've hit on. About what age would your kids be before you start setting that type of structure in the home? With a newborn, almost one, we don't really have a schedule yet. But what age is that important to kind of start implementing that?
You work with kids, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, the program that I'm in, the kids are around age 5, and by then we're already starting that with them. I think is when they can take responsibility. I don't know if there's the research that says a certain age for that, but I know that when kids can understand a responsibility, that like, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do today. That's when, you know, and as far as when they're really, really tiny, I think the fact that if you yourself can keep up with some type of, like a routine or schedule that helps you feel healthy and self-care like you talked about, then the kids will pick up on that too. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, it's not going to matter. They're going to be like, well, they're losing it. Mom, Dad's losing it right now, and I don't feel that either. But, we have 5-year-olds that are responding to certain schedules, but I don't know about younger.
I remember one time, and I don't know why I'm pitching this in right now, being at a spiritual retreat, and we played the medicine game. Either of you guys familiar with the medicine game?
I don't think so.
I think it was from Viktor Frankl. You guys, you know more about Viktor Frankl than I do. And if you don't know about Viktor Frankl, then look him up. You'll find out. So he was pretending they were serving these prisoners in a prison camp, and they had 2 doses of medicine, and they had to decide which 2 they would give it to. And so we're in this big circle with 30 people at this retreat, and they would make you walk around the circle and say, I have no medicine for you, I have no medicine for you, and I have a dose of medicine. You know, it was an interesting experience, but that wasn't what was interesting. When you sat down, one of the leaders came and whispered in your ear, did you keep any medicine for yourself? And I've never gotten over that. Because that is that self-care piece that says, you just gave everything that you had away. And that was the whole point of the whole experience. They made us say, why'd you give it to Steph and you didn't give it to Ken? You know, we went through some of that. But the real point was, man, you have to take care of yourself or you're not going to be good to these prisoners you're trying to attend to. And I think sometimes in the Christian community, we treat that like it's selfish. And it's not selfish to actually just take care of yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, and every other way.
I think it's actually a spiritual discipline. When Jesus gave the Great Commandment, part of it was to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. But the second part, love your neighbor the same way you love yourself. I think there's a built-in assumption there that you love yourself,
Right.
that you know how to take care of yourself. I love your illustration. I use, and I do see Christians, and particularly I think mothers and wives are sometimes just built for self-sacrifice to the point that they don't take care of themselves. But I've had clients where I'll say, I want you to live that out with your neighbor. I want you to go over to your neighbor's house this week and tell them all the things you said about yourself. Go over there and tell them, you're a lousy mother, you're a lousy wife, you need to lose weight, you don't do this, just go ahead and all the bad
Publish
things
it.
you
Hang
say.
out all the bad, ugly,
all the
dirty
ugly
laundry.
things you said about yourself, go say it to them and let me know if you have any neighbors by next week. And the truth of the matter is, lots of people are much better at caring for others than they are caring for themselves. But to go with what Stephanie said, there's particularly with infants, there's tons of research that says that particularly infants respond to their parents' emotional state. And if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're overwhelmed, if you're exhausted, infants especially pick up on that. And so, caring for yourself is not selfish.
Absolutely.
Let's ask one other. Well, Trev, you got another question?
Yeah, I got one more. Somebody messaged this one in to me. What do you do when your wife is having hormone issues, doesn't want to really be around myself or the kids, and also states that she's feeling a little depressed? She doesn't want to seek medical advice in fear of being put on a pill.
I'm going to let these two guys that are much more professional than I am. So you got the whole story. Hormonal struggles, emotionally, mentally, don't want to much be around wife and kids, and doesn't really want to go see the doctor.
If I'm working with someone like that, I've had clients before that don't want to see physicians or don't want to see a psychiatrist, and I'll work with them. But what I tell them is that, I'm going to respect your opinion, but I'm going to tell you that my best professional advice is you're going to do much better, much quicker, if you make use of medical resources. Particularly if you have a hormonal issue, there's medication for that. If you're dealing with anxiety or depression, there's medication that can help. And so it's always a client's decision. But I'm going to tell them that this is my best advice. And I've had lots of clients where, I've gone from being an average therapist at best to a great therapist for no other reason than they finally got on medication. I always remember I had a student a couple years ago, because I've noticed that sometimes Christians want to turn it into a faith issue, that I don't need medication for anxiety or depression. I just need to pray more, trust Jesus.
Man, we're throwing the Christians. This is good, yeah.
Well, I pastored 36 years, so I can.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
And this young woman had been a missionary to China for years.
Oh.
But she was struggling emotionally. And she would talk to the class about this, and she said she finally got on medication. And she said what medication did was it gave her a floor. And that when she was anxious or when she was depressed, she would only go so low, and the medication would keep her from going lower. And it gave her the energy to start working on what she needed to work on. So, it's the difference if I say I don't want any medical intervention, we can still work, but you're starting at the bottom of a pit. Or if you're willing to use medication, you may still have counseling work to do, but you're starting from ground level. So where would you rather start from? If a spouse won't do it, then I'm going to encourage the husband to go to counseling, simply for emotional support, because he's in a really bad place and it's going to be hard to deal with.
Wow. Steph, anything else you want to?
Yeah, again, he says it very well, but I think it's changing your mind frame too. Like you said, that medication is not a weakness. It's not saying like, hey, I can't do this or God can't do this. It's so well, like you said, it's the floor, and then you can work up. But I think being able to change that in your mind and recognizing it as a strength to go get the help that you need. Because it's easier sometimes to just be like, well, I'm just going to be how I am right now. And while it's not comfortable, a lot of times we sit in what's not comfortable because it's just easier than making those steps to do something different. But I think that shows a lot of strength that you're, wanting to go look for help and realize that I can't really do this right now. And there's a lot that's going on in your body that's going to make that very difficult for you to take care of yourself the best way you can. But yeah, it's not a weakness.
I found myself even physically, some of you know I've had a couple of heart attack issues, and they were all electrical. But my cardiologist wants to prescribe these medications. I'm like, dude, I don't want to take that. I don't like statins. I'm not going to take statins. I don't need a little bit of blood pressure. I don't want that. No, I'm not taking that. And I had to be in that route for a while till I finally got over myself and said, you know what? The old boy didn't go to school for 123 years and for no reason. He probably has an idea what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. And I got to the point where I told my cardiologist the other day, I'm over myself. Whatever you tell me to take, I'm going to take. Yeah. And there was a lot of relief for that in me. And I think what's true physically can also be true emotionally and psychologically, where you say, you know what? This guy's worked with lots of people just like me, and at some point, we have to say, I'm going to trust you that maybe that's the right way to handle this thing. Mm-hmm. And but that's got to be a difficult place to be in with somebody that just refuses that right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't want to take this too long. I want to ask kind of one question and wrap up, and that is, so we're kind of in this season. It's a tough season, and we've talked about things I think are valuable. But if you are watching tonight, somebody watching tonight says, my relationship is just struggling right now. I mean, it's just not what I want. Where do we start? I mean, is it just as simple as do that one little thing? Where do we start? What's one piece of advice that we can leave people with kind of when we wrap up tonight? I don't know who wants to go. Steph, you want to go first?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, good.
I think the first thing is recognizing that it's not where you want it to be is huge. You get so used to your everyday thing, and sometimes you realize, oh, this is not, and we're not in a good place right now. So I think even recognizing it is the first step, and say, okay, there is something I want to change. And once you have that motivation, then you can start recognizing those. But it's the little, it really is, like we keep saying, it's the small things that you can do each day. If it's your spouse is going to work that day, put a note in their lunchbox saying, hey, I'm thinking of you today, praying for you today, love you, something like that. Something very tiny and small just to start those conversations together.
It seems like such a hard thing for a guy like me to admit, though. I can recognize it, but I don't want to admit it, that, hey, we're not doing real. And I think you're right. If you don't have some semblance of recognition and admission that this is a problem, we're probably not going to make any headway. So.
And then the same thing is the relationships, it's not always going to be up, and it's not always going to be everything's rainbows and butterflies and all that. That's not what it is.
It's not?
It's not. I know, right? It's crazy to think that. I'm sure you didn't know that. But
no, I didn't.
No, but you really have to realize that I didn't sign up for this to always be rainbows and butterflies. I signed up to be, I'm going to stick through this, and I'm going to love regardless if I'm not always feeling that love from you, because you may be going through something right now, so I'm going to love you. It's not 50-50, it's 100-100. And
like
so
that.
I'm going to love you with everything I have right now and get that,
So you'd say recognize, admit where you are, and begin to make some choices. Ken, anything you want to say, man? She may have knocked it out of the park.
Oh, she did. I would completely agree with that you just start. If you start doing the small things and you don't see the relationship improving, then you need to seek counsel. Okay. I mean, one of the things that marriage therapists will say is that oftentimes people come to see us 2 years too late. That by the time they seek counsel, that they've done so much damage to each other and so much damage to themselves that you've just got a lot of stuff to work through. And it would be so much better to seek therapy, to seek counsel when something's small than to wait for it to grow to the point where you're talking about divorce. Right. And so, if this is a great opportunity to make those small steps. And if you make the small steps and you see your spouse responding, then by all means do more of them. If something's working, do more of it. But if you're trying to make small steps and you and your spouse just can't connect, you need to seek counsel. And particularly when I'm working with Christian couples, I try to tell Christian couples that this Christian stuff just nailed. And then I go home and I find out that I'm not as good at turning the other cheek as I think I am, or I'm not as good at holding my tongue as I think I am, or I'm not as good at forgiveness as I think I am. And it's home that shows me where it is I need to grow spiritually. And so, yeah, if you're trying to do the small things and it's not working, you don't give up. You find someone that you can get good therapy from. And for a Christian, someone who knows how to integrate faith and therapy, because they both need to work together.
I love that. When I ask the inevitable question, that is, my wife likes Almond Joy bars, so I should probably go ahead and buy some and just have them ready. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Is that a small
Absolutely.
thing?
It is.
It seems like a big thing. That's important. That's a pretty important thing, but yeah, it's a small thing.
Well, you know, I have been encouraged tonight personally. Probably what's encouraged me most tonight is just the call to just do the small things. Because sometimes I get overwhelmed with thinking, how can I make this all rainbows and giggles or whatever you said? And I'm not going to make it all rainbows and giggles. But just to do the little things. And I would add the spiritual flavor that says, and man, the Lord He'll make you just kind of recognize those. You know, most of the times it's not that we don't recognize them. It's just that we don't want to take the time to do them, or we won't do them.
Well, I've heard you say 100 times in church that the way that we demonstrate love for God is by loving other people.
Absolutely.
That should start with our spouse and with our kids and caring for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, unless you guys got something else to say, we're going to kind of wrap up, and Stephanie, thank you for bringing 3 years of marriage experience and a wonderful education. And Ken, thank you for your breadth of everything. And can I encourage you tonight, if you are in a place in your marriage where, man, I don't know why, it may be this season, it may just be where you are, that it feels tough right now. Well, first of all, seek the Lord, talk to the Lord about it, and then just begin. We've said just begin to do the little things that are respectful and loving and kind, and continue to do them. If they don't make things better, then call Campbellsville University and say, hey, we need to talk. But my guess is in most of the situations that we're in, those little things will begin to make a huge difference. So thank you, guys. I want to pray, and then we'll go. Lord, thank you tonight that we got a chance to talk about marriage. And we're grateful that the three of us on this platform are married. And every one of us have an imperfect marriage, and we are imperfect spouses. But it's a joy. And I wouldn't want to leave anybody tonight with any question about the absolute joy and blessing of marriage. And I pray that we just go away with a simple commitment to do the little things that are a blessing and helpful to one another in these days. May your grace and your peace and your mercy give us the ability to do that, and we'll give you all the praise. These things we ask in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And all God's people say it.
Amen.
Amen.